Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I am back today with Kit, and we're going to be building a little CLI application over the course of several streams, and we thought it would be kind of cool to integrate some AI features and whatnot. So the goal here, or maybe I'll let Kit explain a little bit more in detail, but the goal is to basically build a little CLI that will kind of enhance our experience when working with AI tooling like Claude Code or other integrated AI experiences where you might want to use like your context from a particular editor or whatnot, but via like a separate model. So maybe I'll let Kit kind of explain a little bit more about what I mean. But yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty much exactly it at a high level. I made a little README here, so we're not totally in the dark. So my goal at least is sort of twofold. One, to show everybody how to use effect CLI, and in the process effect more generally, idiomatically. And I don't have all that knowledge in my head, but luckily Maxwell does. So I'll just kind of be stumbling through this as best I can. And I'll heavily lean on Maxwell for, best practices, business solutioning, etc. We're going to make sure this is SOC 2 compliant, etc. So it's going to be great. So what is the tool? As for some context, well, it's going to be called Context CLI. So it's a CLI tool that generates structured context from files using glob patterns. So pretty basic. Little examples here is that you would call whatever we name it, Context CLI, throw a bunch of globs at it. And what it's going to output is some kind of, XML. XML is making a comeback with LLMs these days. Very exciting. I thought XML was on its way out, but no. LLMs apparently eat and digest XML for breakfast, and they enjoy the formatting. It just apparently whatever. I trust Anthropic's reporting that LLMs do nicely with XML formatted outputs. Not that we're actually parsing this again into any structured format. It's really just that LLMs seem to become slightly less confused when you give them structured output, and they've obviously been trained on lots of XML and SOAP and etc. probably. So anyway, they're good at this. So we're going to give it a glob or a series of globs, and our tool will output some XML of basically the content of the files that have been matched by those globs. And then there's also going to be an optional -- prompt option, and that'll just simply throw in a little prompt at the bottom. And there'll be a -- copy option, which will copy the output to the clipboard instead of printing to standard out. So you're going to say context CLI, you might give it a bunch of files, all of your TypeScript files, and add a prompt saying, hey, please analyze this. And maybe you'll also say -- copy, -- copy. So it will copy this to your clipboard, and then you could paste it into chatgpt.com with O3 or O3 Pro or Gemini 2.5 or Kimi or one of the many other millions of models that are propagating out there. You could call this manually, but actually the real true final intention is to give this to Claude, if you're using Claude Code or any of the other sort of CLI tools. And the nice thing about Claude is that it's really good at working with command line apps, CLIs. So you could basically just say, hey, Claude, I have the CLI. Hit it with -- help, figure out how it works, and use it. You could also build a command that sort of pre-explains this, a / command. That's what I've done a while ago, and just hit /GPT, and it'll say, hey, Claude, I need you to use the CLI tool, feed it a bunch of context, and also add a prompt stating sort of what you're stuck on right now, and ask an expert for help. Also, I don't know if anyone is familiar with AMP, which is a sort of a Claude Code competitor. There are all these things, right? There's GitHub Codex, there's Goose. I don't know. There's millions of them. Everyone's vibe coding their own terminal UI to wrap a model. And they're great. Claude works great, but sometimes if you've read any of these silly prompt engineering documents, you see certain patterns crop up over and over again, such as it's nice you want to clear Claude Code's context frequently. Because there's context rot and it'll get polluted and it'll get too emotionally attached to its previous solution, so it'll screw with your tests and just make them pass without actually changing the implementation, hard coding strings, etc. So this ends up working really nicely because you're sort of having it gather all the context and you can copy paste it into a fresh, non-attached, dispassionate third-party LLM. One or a bigger one like O3 that's more expensive, or O3 Pro that's more expensive, and get a nice solution. And then paste its output back into Claude Code. So that was probably too much TMI. That's the idea. Using effect to make this, and of course, instead of the copy paste mechanism that we'll initially start with, we can enhance this with a sort of stretch goal. As Maxwell said, to maybe just ask the model directly. I don't know exactly what we want to have for our CLI API for that, but maybe you throw in a subcommand ask or something, specify a model, and it can go and just do that whole cycle for you. So you don't need to copy paste it anywhere as long as you have an API key. O3 is pretty cheap these days. They lowered the cost and it's pretty great. So does that cover everything, Maxwell? Did that make sense?
Yeah, so if to summarize, I guess the goal of the CLI is to kind of augment workflows when you're using these AI-powered code editors. And the idea is if your AI code editor like Claude Code or whatever else you're using gets stuck on a particular problem because, these models are great at certain things, but when they encounter certain issues, they're not the greatest. You can, essentially use the CLI to gather a bunch of information into a context that you can then copy and paste into a chat with another model that might be better at, giving instructions or doing deep analysis to try to figure out what the problem is. And then you can grab the output of that model and put it back into the editor that you're using, like Claude Code or whatever.
Yep, exactly.
And I guess the reason for the copy paste workflow, at least for the moment, is to avoid having to go through an OAuth flow with the model of choice, right? So instead of going through their API, which you have to pay for a separate token, and it's a whole thing. If you have a copy paste workflow, you can use your account that you've already got with these models to do that sort of stuff. And we avoid having to go through an OAuth flow through the CLI.
Yeah, if you're already paying OpenAI, $200 a month, you may as well get all your free chats in that way. But yeah, certainly a little less convenient.
Good morning, Mattia. Welcome to the stream. We got Mattia hanging out with us this morning.
All right.
Sorry. For those in the audience, I'm still trying to figure out how to get my stream to work well with guests. So that we can have music and everything like that. But we'll get it figured out eventually. So for now, we're back to using Riverside, so no music, but yeah. So why don't we just jump in and start wherever you want, Kit. I feel like we could probably just jump straight into code and see where we get.
Yep, no, that's perfect. One last thing I wanted to say contextually is just it's nice to give attribution to prior art. So there's an app called Repo Prompt that's kind of built for this workflow as for the Mac, I think in Windows too. And then the AMP tool by SourceGraph, they have this whole ask the Oracle command. If you tell AMP to ask the Oracle, it'll I think do a very similar thing, gather a context, make a prompt, and send it to O3. So they use Claude 4 Sonnet 4 for all of their agentic biz. And then if you get stuck, they found a few people have simultaneously discovered that asking O3 when you get stuck kind of can unstick things. But that's enough context. Yeah. So let me copy this business into our main TS. Also, by the way, I'm using the Z editor because does copy paste work in Z? I think it does. I must have misclicked. There we go. Okay, lovely. I'm using Z because I've upgraded to the macOS beta, and trying to screen share from my normal editor, it just explodes for some reason, and the window blanks out, and it's sort of the UI gets leprosy, and parts start disappearing randomly. So anyway,
Julian, one thing. Okay, Julian G, thank you very much for the Prime. Appreciate you subscribing to the stream. Hope you're enjoying it. Hope you enjoy all the content. And if there's ever anything that you guys want to see that we're not doing, please let me know. And we can try to build that content in. But yeah, thank you very much for the support. Really appreciate it.
Cool. What is a Prime? I've heard this.
You can use your Amazon Prime account to subscribe to a stream on Twitch. So I think you get like one subscription through your Prime account.
Oh wow! I had no idea.
Like per month or something like that. You can like use your Prime to subscribe to a stream. So
cool. I think I have Amazon Prime. I should. I've never wielded that before. I'll wield it your way, Maxwell. I want to be thanked on stream. I'll do that later.
Matthias said when you mentioned AMP, he was remembering Winamp. What a great time that was.
Yeah, I think a little different, but yeah, it was the best we could do with the technology at the time. It can only play music, which you can use since the music streaming is broken. So if you have Winamp, play your own music. So yeah, let's talk about the design, and I'll sort of throw out my high level way that I would approach this, and then you can correct me. So there's a few different places we can start. We could start at the top or at the bottom, or maybe burn the candle at both ends and work towards the middle. From at the very top, we could start just by kind of getting most of the effect CLI content out of the way right away, because I think luckily effect CLI makes it pretty simple to define the commands that we'll need here. And we can kind of just have an empty body, the handler of our CLI, to just kind of print out maybe the options that have been specified. And then as a following step, we can sort of actually make a service, sort of dig our way down, make a service that would actually execute the logic of the program to keep things nice and decoupled. So eventually we might, I don't think we mentioned this, but have an MCP interface into this, the same set of functionality instead of just the CLI interface, or who knows, an HTTP server, something else. Does that make sense as a starting point? Just start with the CLI interface, and then we can, once we have that
100%.
working, we can work down.
Yeah, let's get the scaffolding for the CLI set up. We can maybe just start with like the basic commands and options that we want to be available, and then we can slowly abstract pieces of functionality into services as necessary. But yeah, I would say let's start with like the options and whatnot, and we can go from there.
Okay, cool. So there are sort of two main DSL data types that will, or maybe a few of them actually. So we're going to have to deal with three things, I guess. So there's commands, options, and args. So a command is kind of the top level, the whole thing, context CLI, the command you run. There might be subcommands that we talked about briefly, like we might have an ask subcommand, but for now there's just going to be one top level command. And a command has both options and args. And options are sort of these flag like configurations, like prompt that will take a string, and copy, which actually doesn't have an argument associated with it. It's kind of just like a Boolean flag. So its presence indicates that it should be true, and its absence would indicate that it should be false, that we don't want to copy. And then we have a string of sort of positional arguments, these just flat arguments that do not have a corresponding flag. And in this case, we want to be able to accept multiple, what we call args here, which would be these glob patterns. Did I get that right?
Yeah, basically options represent either flags or like Boolean flags. So like an option with a value or a Boolean flag. Whereas args represent literally positional arguments on the command line. And there have been like many long-standing issues with effect CLI that I want to address in the future. I think one of the primary ones you brought up on Discord the other day, but I'd really like to figure out a way to lift the requirement. Right now, there's a requirement that positional args always follow flags. So it goes like option flags, then positional args on your CLI. Otherwise, things won't get parsed. But I'd really love to find a way to lift that argument or that requirement in the future. Maybe using it like totally new parsing algorithm for the CLI. Maybe using like something based on Rust's like clap parser or something like that. I don't know. But that's one thing that I really would like to improve in the future. But for now, when you see us working with these CLIs, it's always going to be like options followed by args on the command line.
And just to visualize what that is. So notice how we have prompt and then copy and then our arguments. Unfortunately, if we flip these around, it will not parse this. And this is actually, we're following POSIX Utilities Syntax Guideline 9, apparently. Which if you have strict POSIX CLI parsing, you're supposed to have all your options first. I mean, I guess it makes it a little less ambiguous, but it's certainly not flexible or as enjoyable to use. I think we're used to a more relaxed parsing in general. Commander, other popular CLI parsers sort of are much more flexible here. So yeah, that sounds like a fun follow-up that we can enhance this to not strictly follow POSIX Utility Syntax Guideline 9. But for now, we will not really worry about that and just make sure we call it with options first. Cool. So let's start by just defining some options. It's pretty easy to do. Let me see. So I need to import. We need command. Oh, nice. Z, well done. Options, great. And args, at least for now. And so let's begin with maybe the prompt option. So I will say const prompt equals options. And this is going to be a text option. So we want to get back a string. And it's going to have a name. Let's see exactly how. Okay, just a name. So this is going to be prompt. And we'll see what that gets us. So it gets us an option of a string. And we can test this out. I might not be passing in all of the configuration right away. We'll start really simple. So that's all we need really for prompt, I believe. And then copy is going to be options.boolean. And it's going to be called copy. And yeah, those are our options. Not so bad.
Yeah. The text option I don't think there's any other configuration really for text. This is literally just to parse in a piece of text. For Booleans, there's a second optional argument that you can pass in, which is an object of options, where you can pass in like what the value should be if the flag is present. So basically like the default for if present is true, but you can change that to be false. Like if it's present, then you can also have like negation names that you pass in. So like if you have copy specified, then it's true. But if you have like --no copy or whatever, like that could be like a negation name that you pass in. And I think there's one more option in there. I forget what the third one is that I made.
Yeah, aliases, or that's always there.
Yeah, so you can pass in aliases directly in the Boolean options, but you can also add an alias with the combinator, which we can probably show now that we have like our basic options. So when you declare an option, you can like augment the capabilities of the option by piping together different things. So like here's an example of like using the with alias combinator, which takes in an option and then adds an alias to that option. So in this case, the prompt option will now be able to be specified with either -p or -- prompt. So you can basically add like short flags, because the default for options is to create like a long flag where you have a double dash followed by the name. Whereas like the aliases are generally for short flags. Yeah, and there's a bunch of other combinators we can do. We can add like descriptions to our options. We can add defaults. For Boolean options, it's like a little bit confusing. Something again I'd like to try to figure out how to make better in the future. But defaults are specified, like obviously like in the options for Boolean. Like if you specify a default, it might not get applied because Booleans naturally have like a default value. Yeah. So anyways, but yeah, you can basically like augment options with different capabilities. Like, we could add descriptions here maybe to give this more information. I don't know.
Yes. So yes, copy instead of printing. Yeah, those are both decent. Another thing is that the prompt is actually optional, which it isn't right now. So there's, I believe, also a options.optional setting that we can throw in here. Oops, I've closed my sidebar. So now the type of this, just by having that there, it changes. So previously it was it's a little confusing. It was options.options of string, and now it's options.options of option of string. So if I remove that, we'll see, it's just string. Now it's an option of string. So we could try it with and without, but basically now if we weren't to have optional and we were to try to run our command and not provide prompt, we would see an error. Otherwise, with this, it's okay to leave it off, and it will default to none, or I guess undefined. I'm not sure exactly. That's where
it'll default to none if you leave it off. So basically, it'll try to parse prompt from the command line. If it finds it, you'll get a sum of whatever the value is. Otherwise, you'll get none. Cool. And you can also map the value of an option. So like as part of this SDK, like let's say you, I don't know, want to change the behavior so that what Kit was saying is true, right? Like where instead of having a prompt that's an option of string, you want to have a prompt that's either a string or undefined. You can then at the very end of this do an options.map. We won't do this, but options.map. And then like you can say, if you could use the, there's an option combinator. So like on the option module and just say get or undefined.
Cool. Get or undefined. Obviously, I need to import option, I think.
Yeah.
My big thing up there, option. And then we can say get or undefined. Perfect. Value. And now it maps correctly to options of string or undefined. So we could do a bunch of crazy stuff. Also, maybe turn this into another data type or wrap it in something, brand it, if that's the TypeScript terminology. But yeah, obviously we don't need that right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of functionality you can build into the parsing of the option, but basically that's what we're describing here. Is we're describing both like the structure in the like the usage of the option as well as like how it's going to be parsed from the command line. So, I will be right back in 1 second. Somebody at my door.
No worries. I will stumble forward and we'll see if this compiles. So, obviously, we also want the arguments, but before we even get to that. Let's just try to run it. I like to get a feedback loop going as quickly as possible. So the next thing we'll need to actually run something is the command itself. So I'll call this command, and there's a command.make method, and this takes a few arguments, which is first the name. So this is going to be called context, and then it has some further arguments. I believe that is, once again, I'm using Z, so I'm not entirely sure how to get this autocomplete going in here to see what my options are. Oh, there we go. No, that's recommending something. So what I believe it is, as a second argument after context, is all of our options that we've specified, or arguments, all the configuration, basically the inputs that we're expecting here. So that takes place that should be structured as an object. So we're going to have copy and prompt, and we can just do structuring assignment, I believe that's called, as the second argument. So now this will be parameterized. We get this command type back that has its name there as a type level string. And then these are the arguments, or these types have been derived from the return values of the arguments. So copy and prompt, which is going to be a Boolean and an option of a string. And then the third argument is, if I remember correctly, is the handler, copy, prompt. And in here, implementation goes here. I think I've put this in the right place. And maybe we could just do effect.log Backtick, behold my options. Oh, no, what am I doing? Copy and prompt. And it looks like this is failing for some reason, but we'll see why.
What's cool here, you're not yielding or returning the effect. So we just have to either...
Totally. Yep.
What's cool about the command APIs is like you can specify the handler directly in line here, or you can omit it and just carry the command around in your application. And then later on there's a combinator in the command module called command.withHandler that allows you to attach a handler to the command. So like you can either do it in line like this or attach it later. And I think that's kind of like an interesting feature of commands because I don't know, it could be useful in certain circumstances to not inline the handler, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, I do have one question about that. Maybe if we have many subcommands, that's probably useful because I am curious, can you have options sort of at the base command and then have additional options, like sort of shared options across all subcommands? Is that kind of thing?
So when you create a subcommand and register it with a particular like parent command, which we can actually do if you want, maybe just create like a mock subcommand, like above your command, just do like const my subcommand.
Okay, I'll prepare the one that we'll have eventually for ask, and that'll just be make.
And just do ask, and you can leave the rest of the arguments blank. And then off the end of the command make constructor, do a dot pipe and do a command.with subcommands, and just pass in the ask. So if you look at the type of command now, you'll see that there's this subcommand in there. It's not returning anything, right? But inside ask, right? So in the in the ask command, pass it an empty argument for just the options and args. In the constructor for ask, give it an empty object for that, and then give it a handler.
Yep.
And inside the handler, you can even just use the effect.fn method here if you want to. Instead of doing like just a lambda, we'll use effect.fn. And then give it a generator function. So the generator syntax here would be like just a function star, and you can remove
for this, you're saying like this function star.
Yeah. Because what I want to show is like why we even have these other features to begin with. So here, go ahead and this isn't going to work right away, but go ahead and do a const, I don't know, args, I don't know, equals yield command. Like literally the
yield command.
Yield command. So now take the command constructor that you have there, the make constructor, extract everything but like the name and the options and args, and move it above ask. So basically like leave the handler and stuff like till later, and just take the name of the command and the options and args and put it above ask.
I see what you mean.
Yeah. And then later on you can just do like a command.piped, command with handler.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, I'll move this down here. Command.with handler. And then theoretically, that would all go there. And I've screwed something up with my slash there. Yeah.
So now if you look at the type of args.
Yeah, let me just do hello? Yes, I've screwed something up with parsing because it's not it's not formatting. What have I done? Something silly.
Yeah, that's correct. The type of the LSP is going to complain here, saying that you're not yielding the log. That's
Yep. Yeah, it's just not formatting. I don't know why. I broke something, but I don't exactly know what. Anyway, we'll find that out momentarily. Yes, I'll look at the types
up above. Actually, I don't know where, but
oh yeah, look at that. I added. How did I do that? That's so crazy. Okay. All right. So yes, let's see. If we're not using something, that's totally fine. Let me use it. And let's see what that is. Args. Yeah, that's very interesting. So I'm guessing we get the options back from the other command. Okay.
Options and arguments. So the idea here is you've got the ability to, so commands are hierarchical to begin with, right? You've got like your parent command. You've got this like parent command that has some options and args, and then later on in the CLI you may specify your subcommand. So commands are by default like hierarchical, right? The idea is you've got the ability to access the arguments and options of your parent command in your subcommand, and it's fully type safe because let's just say in the handled command down below, can you comment out the subcommands here that you're providing?
Oh,
yeah. So take a look at the type of handled command, or maybe ask. Sorry, the type of ask. So you'll see here that the second argument to ask is a command.context. And we're specifically saying, I mean, all the context wording here is getting a little confusing, but you're getting the context of the parent command. So if you never satisfy that context and you use ask somewhere in your CLI, you'll get a type error in your code. So like, for example, if you were to try to run ask, like with underneath the handled command, go ahead and just do like a command.run ask. And then you probably have to pass in the second object thingy with the name and version.
Okay.
Just to like finish this off. Motivate this example. So this is like an example of like how you actually create a CLI application. But so if you then like assign this to a variable, like, I don't know, CLI, and then hover over that variable CLI app, I need to just take a look at what the type of CLI app is.
I think it's a function, right? I would call it with the args.
Yeah. So now go ahead and just CLI app.
Yep.
So we're basically just going to finish out the structure of this. It's process.argv. Process.argv,
yes. Cool. Yeah, and it looks like it's failing is not assignable to, there's no context.
The very last line of the TypeScript compiler output tells you what the problem is. Basically, like the type context is not assignable to never. So the issue here is that you are using a subcommand, right? You're accessing the parent command in a subcommand, but you're never like it's kind of like an inversion of the provide concept. You need to register that subcommand with a parent command that provides that context in order to make it work. So like it's a little bit of like an inversion of like thinking about like provide, because like you're actually like you need to register the subcommand with the parent to provide that context. But that's how we made it type safe, and that's how we made it able to you to basically be able to get the options and arguments from a parent command in a subcommand, because it is by default hierarchical, but we wanted it to be type safe. So this is kind of like the strategy we came up with.
No, that's very cool. That's very clever. I like that a lot. And then this also very nicely solves the problem of having shared options for all subcommands. So you sort of have your base command up here. I won't call that context, I guess, for now. We have some naming issues that we need to solve later. But no, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. So we just get all the options. We don't have to redundantly include them here. That's really nice.
I forget. Do me a favor. Delete the object, the empty object there. I forget if we have an overload that handles the case where.
No.
Okay.
I mean, we probably would have some this is where we'd have the model option.
Well, this is the other reason why we made the ability to register handlers separate from the command, because like this felt awkward to us. So right here, the alternative to this is to do command.make and just give it the name, and then pipe that to the handler. This way you can like basically get rid of the
empty argument command with handler and throw that in there. Cool. I like it. That's pretty fancy. And we will eventually need this. And Ask will have its own option eventually of the model that we're going to provide it. Maybe for now I will just delete it, because this we could add it later, just to keep it, just to show it in our simple case, just how simple it can be.
Sure.
But we'll definitely add that when we add the LLM support. So yeah, I'll just do all this. Command, and then we'll run commands, and this will be called context. And cool. And it is now sad for some other reason. File system.
So the CLI has a default context that it expects. So if we looked at like the CLI docs, for example, we would see like some information about why this is the case, but we don't need to take a look at the README or anything like that. The idea is that your CLI application, under the hood, we need access to a few pieces of information, namely, there are a few pieces of functionality that we include by default in the CLI that rely on the file system, the terminal, and the ability to access like path module from like whatever context you're going to use. So basically, in the documentation for the CLI, we say like, okay, you need to include the context layer for whatever runtime you're using. So in this case, we're using Node, so you could just import from the platform Node. You could import Node context.
Okay.
Just kind of like a module that exposes a shared layer. So node context.layer has in it basically everything we need, and then we can just provide our app layer.
Cool. Sweet. I've seen sometimes these layers are capitalized, but maybe that's just a weird pattern. I don't know.
Usually, like what we do, the convention we've started to follow is when we expose a layer from a module like this, we lowercase it. But in app code, we will uppercase like what's the name of this casing scheme where it's capital
Pascal?
case? Pascal,
Yeah.
thank you. Pascal case, like the layer that we're going to construct. So yeah, this is perfect.
Yeah. I'm a fan of Screaming Snake case, but I understand if there's no place for that here. Okay, cool. Yeah. App layer. All right, great. So, well, I think we can test it now. It's sad about these unused arguments, so I will remove these for the moment, and then try to see how to run this. I think I could just run npm dev, and we should get some kind of error. Yeah. Behold my options. Copy was false, and prompt was none. And so this is basically, prompt was an option of none, which is lovely.
We can even test it by like giving it flags and stuff like that.
Yep. So let's give it copy. I wonder if I'll need to do the extra dash. Yeah, I'll need to do the dash for npm sake. Cool. So now we have copy is true. Maybe that was hard to see right there. And you see what was passed in, copy. And I can have prompt of make me a successful SaaS company. No mistakes, as they say. Okay. Cool. And now we have an option of some where we have a successful SaaS company. So, and that's going to be copied to the clipboard, which is very convenient. So great. The options are parsing. Yes, we obviously talked about some of the more advanced features, but if we kept it very basic, if we keep it basic, it works, right? And that's kind of what you want with any DSL, for it to be responsive to the complexity of the problem you're trying to solve. So hopefully it scales linearly with the complexity of the problem, and it seems like it will. Let me open up the terminal again. Terminal, because there's some other features that are actually really cool that we should probably show off. So help is one. And so if I scroll up here, we'll see, we're using the context CLI. Ignore all this. Obviously, that's just, NPM output there. But context version 0.1.0. And then it sort of shows how to use it. Using that fun semi-regex syntax. I wonder if this syntax does have a name. But yes, copy is optional, so it's in the square brackets, and it is aliases, so those options are comma separated in the inner parens, and then prompt is -p or -p. Dash prompt, and then text. I mean, you need the argument for both cases. And then it sort of has a separate little help doc for every single option. So copy, true or false value, copy the output so that's our description showing up. And it knows that the setting is optional. It's kind of built in because it'll default to true. And then prompt, user-defined piece of text. Yeah, and I did open it up an issue. I don't know what you think about this, if it's even worth getting into now. Just like maybe it might be nice to have not this built-in help if you have your own description or something, or at least the option to squelch it.
I am open to every piece of improved user experience we can do here. I've wanted to revisit CLI for a very long time. I just don't have the bandwidth at the moment. But I think that the library could use a lot of love because I think it's a really cool way to build effect apps. But there are some like edge cases that are like annoying for folks. And like, for example, I get a lot of flack from Johannes about the double spacing here, which is hard to read for a normal human.
Yes.
And then, by default, we print out all of the built-in arguments as well, like version and wizard, log level, etc. To turn it off right now, you could in your app layer, you could do a layer.merge all, and then make it an array of layers. And in here, there's a CLI config module. Where we can say where is it coming from? Can you look at the import for me?
It says affect CLI. Yeah, let me go back. Sure.
There should be, that's why it's importing from the module. Can you just get rid of the trailing /CLI config? Just import from CLI.
I get you. Okay.
Yeah. And then if we go back down, there should be a .layer helper. And that takes a function where we can turn off show built-ins and set that to false.
Okay.
And
something is bad about this?
I think merge all might not take a layer, maybe. I mean, merge all might not take an array.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure about that. Okay, cool.
I couldn't remember either.
So yeah, but hopefully now we just see prompt and okay, that's nicer. Obviously, maybe should that be the default? Should it be easier to config? That we could also talk about that. Like one. I mean, there are a bunch of nice examples, right? There's the GitHub CLI, which has some pretty decent help formatting. That's single spaced. Has some examples are nice. Learn more. Yeah. How would we still have much of this be derived? But maybe, it might be worth exploring some different formats here in the future. 100%. It does work, so there's no no problem there. Cool. So I mean, we have now basically what we needed. Oh, I guess there's the arguments. There are the arguments, and it might also be worth just to briefly check if I remove the optional requirement or the optional configuration from prompt, what happens if we then don't pass it in. Copy, and then it should probably blow up in some way with a nice error message. Missing value. Okay.
Yeah, if you scroll up, there's a prettier printed error message. Expected to find option prompt right there. If you scroll down a little bit. Okay. The reason you're getting the second one is because we go back and forth on this quite a bit, but the node runtime.run main method at the very end of your thing, if you open a pair of, if you call it like a function, there's an options argument that it takes. And I forget the name of the option. It's something about errors. Disable error reporting, set that to true. And then rerun this. Gotcha. I don't remember if this turns it off. And if you scroll up, now you can see that the debug error thingy because it will still propagate the CLI error through, basically. You have so node runtime.run main by default, if it encounters an error, will try to print out that error, which is why here you're getting both like the rendered output from effect CLI, and then you're getting the like debug printed node runtime run main error.
Yeah,
so
and then we're getting the additional like npm run error too, which wouldn't show up if we built this. So there were a lot of extra error reports.
I just want to acknowledge some chats. Etsy, I'm glad you were able to learn something. Hopefully we can teach you more things about what CLI can do. And Userin, welcome. And it sounds like you got CLI working in the browser. That's kind of cool. It's like a router thing, which is pretty interesting. The other thing we might want to show off, Kit, is if you call your CLI with no options, no arguments, and just pass a -- wizard.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I wanted to get to that. Let's take a look. So the wizard mode. Everyone loves a wizard. Let's see what happens now. Cool. So this might be because I'm running it in dev.
Yeah, we can change this the way you're running it. Do you have by any chance TSX installed?
I think so, yeah.
Your repo? So literally just call TSX and then the full path to that main.ts, wherever it is.
Okay. Wizard. Hopefully this works. Okay, great. So so I'm hitting the left and right arrow keys, and it's sort of walking us through all the options. So copy. Do we want to copy? Yeah, let's do it. Let's copy. And then a user-defined piece of prompt. Help me. And then, it shows basically, with the aliases as well, what it's going to generate. And then we will run it. And it will run it. And behold my options, copy true, prompt help me. So that's fun.
Yeah, I think that the wizard mode can also use a little bit of formatting love. But just like cool things that we tried to bake in, or I tried to bake in while I was developing this, I thought that it would be fun to like, you can, even let AI walk through the wizard mode, right? Like, as long as it has the ability to answer interactively, like you could theoretically have it walk through the wizard mode or whatever. But anyway.
AI currently does struggle with interactive CLI tools. I was thinking about that, if there's a good way to solve that problem. I mean, that's kind of what MCP is. It's just that MCP is a little heavyweight. I wish there were sort of like an ad hoc way to, if you had a CLI that exposed sort of an MCP mode, it can just fire it off and interact with it live without having you to, edit your various config files, which have not been standardized yet across all the different tools. But anyway, That's a problem for a different day.
Also, I just want to acknowledge a couple of follows that we got. So Slicely, Carlos, HSS, and Sinister SPD. Thank you very much for your follows. Hope you guys are enjoying the stream. And let us know if there's other content you'd like to see in the future. We're open to anything. But thank you very much for the support. We really appreciate it. So,
was that slicey or slicely? Is it adverby or
slicely? I don't know. Okay. I like the name though.
Yeah. At a karaoke once, a guy who referred to himself only as Slicey did the most heart-wrenching rendition of "That's Life" that I'd ever heard. It was very magnificent, and he disappeared forever. Anyway, we have wizard mode. We have the running of the thing. We don't have arguments yet, so we should probably finish off that. Pretty close here. So it basically works nearly identically. So we'll call it globs, I guess, except instead of globs, which is fun to say. So instead of options, we just use args. Other than that, it's a very similarly shaped API. So in this case, I think we're probably going to go with text. I'm not sure. Okay, create a file argument that we.
I also think like a cool thing for the future could be, it would introduce a dependency into CLI, but a cool thing for the future could be like having an args.glob and an options.glob maybe, because it's a pretty common like thing in a CLI tool to want to glob a path.
I was thinking that, yeah.
It could be cool, or introduce it as like a service somehow. I don't know, but it would be kind of interesting. Anyways, continue. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
Yeah. I guess we wouldn't necessarily have to execute the globs. We could just kind of make sure that it's properly formatted and just parse them. or something. But yeah, I mean, there are some complexities there. But yeah, no, that would be nice to have. But I think for now we'll go with text. There is, I think, a path, but path unfortunately isn't the glob, so it'll be a little too specific. It's not, I don't think it's much of a problem, except if you run it in wizard mode, which is really cool. It has you sort of select a file, as I noticed. But so anyway, args.text glob or globs. I'm not sure. This is just a name for reference because remember, this does not take. It's not going to be globs anything. It's just simply going to, when we run context, expect there to be some kind of glob or globs passed in, or hard-coded paths to anything.
Yeah, this thing is going to give you an error because args takes a config object. We could probably alleviate this in the future, but basically, instead of args.text and a string, you just do an object with name.
Mm-hmm. Are there? I'm guessing there's some other options there. Oh
yeah,
no,
there's like a base args config is just like the name, but with path args and formatting args, you can like have additional options. So for example, like args.file, I think takes a particular file type and it'll try to parse that file type. So
yeah, it might be nice to have the same pattern of, a secondary options array, like whatever it is here. I forget what it is.
The only tricky part of that was that we wanted to make names like optional. So there's not really a good way to like have an optional string first, plus then like an optional optional options argument second. So that's kind of like why we went the route we did with args. But we could everything in CLI, in my opinion, is up for debate because we've learned a lot about like the things that work well and the things that don't. So like I'm personally I'd be up for like considering any changes. So
yeah, I mean, and the first design was kind of based off of Zio CLI. I know you've made some differences, changes, and improvements as well, like that whole global command option parsing. I don't think that was a feature of Zio CLI.
No,
so that's nice.
Yeah, we wanted to take it and make it work for us. So yeah, we made a lot of changes, and the internals actually differ quite a substantial amount now. But yeah. So I guess we'll continue with this and see where we get.
Cool. So yeah, right now, well, what we see is, maybe the globs. Yeah, globs is fine. Globs patterns, whatever we want to call it. So we can pipe again and do now args with description. Globs to match. That's nice and terse. Yes, globs to provide file context to the LM friend. I don't know. Well, it doesn't really matter for now. Now the type of this at the moment is an args of a string. So right now I think it will only parse one of these, and we want it to be repeated. And so there's an option here called args.repeated. Correct me if I'm misleading anyone. And by doing this, now we get a string, an array of strings. Still getting used to TypeScript syntax. So that's basically what we need. And so if I come down here or up here and just throw in globs, and globs, we should now be able to also list our, I think it wants it to be in a particular order. Globs, I'm okay with that.
For the object, like it doesn't matter what order it is in either object. Like it'll destructure them just fine. But auto formatting in many cases will alphabetize your destructuring.
Okay.
Yeah. The order in which you put them in the object doesn't really matter for destructuring purposes.
Sure, it was just a linting error.
Linting thing.
Which makes total sense. Yeah, I don't know if the order of them, is there any kind of ordering that you get secretly behind the scenes, like in terms of the order of the help documentation? Is that determined by the order of the keys in this structured object?
Probably.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure of the implementation of object, if it does preserve somewhat internally the ordering. I know
I think that it does, but I honestly don't know. Okay. I know map internally preserves ordering, but I'm not sure. But yeah.
But yeah, let me try real quick. I'm just curious. I mean, we'll see that we get now our arguments of globs. And so, yeah, I mean, it seems to have,
arguments will always render first. So like the argument section will always render before options and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And it shows you the right, POSIX guideline, syntax guideline 9 format here. So that's nice. So yeah, let me try to just out of pure curiosity, swap prompt and globs. And it looks like actually that's not a linting error here, just in the consumption of it. So maybe that's to allow for this. So we'll see if now prompt is above copy. No, it is not. Okay. So who knows if that's a JavaScript thing or the implementation of this. It doesn't really matter. I don't know. I don't know if people care about configuring that. Maybe that's something we could think about in the future. Open an issue if you really want to configure the order of your options. I
read it. That's you saying that they're missing a loading in progress bar. Yeah, I know. There are definitely a lot of nice to haves that we could implement. The loading progress bar feels like it would be a user land thing, or maybe something that would be in the handler though. Like, I'm not sure how it would work from the CLI specification side. You know what I mean? Like, the spec of the CLI is more to like describe how arguments and options are going to be parsed. I'm not sure how a loading bar would work in the spec, but like from a handler perspective, I could see where a loading bar would be like an interesting thing to expose.
Yeah, there's this continuum of CLI to TUI apps, and I think the Effect CLI sort of bridges the gap a bit because there's that whole prompt. I mean, there's the wizard, right, which is more of a TUI, and all those prompt options or prompt commands or prompt. I don't know what to call them. Every term is overloaded now. Yes, the prompts. Thank you. Ow, I hit my knee. So yeah, it makes sense as something to fit in there, but it's more of like a TUI thing.
For sure. Yeah. There's a point at which you have to like cut off the feature set and start implementing it elsewhere. I think like the progress bar type of thing is where I cut things off. I think there are other prompts that I want to implement, like multi-select and whatnot, but I don't know. I feel like a progress bar type thing would be an external library thing, something that would go in a handler. I don't know.
Yeah, or there could be an Effect TUI library that does the whole. They can rewrite Claude code in it.
The number of people I've had who have asked me if that's a thing that I'm working on is not zero. So, and the answer is no. It's not something I'm working on.
Once you start getting involved in ANSI, codes and terminal rendering, it's hard. I found myself having written too many TUI libraries and too many languages. Avoid it. You have other more productive things to do with your life.
Yeah.
Turn back now. Anyway, so yeah, okay. Now we have everything we need. I think. I didn't test it yet. I tested the help, but not the passing of the globs. The passing of the globs.
Passing of the globs.
So let's try *** ts and package.json. There will be no validation that this is real, but we do get our globs, which is great. And the globs are an array of strings, which I guess render like this. I'm new to TypeScript, so I'm learning these things.
Yeah, if you stringify an array in JavaScript, it just renders as like a comma separated, and then it calls toString on the inner values.
Cool. And no, doesn't give you any brackets. That's fine.
If you JSON stringify it, it'll give you the brackets.
Oh, sure, the whole way. Yeah, maybe that'll be nicer. Well, I should have just JSON stringified the whole options. But anyway, we get the idea. Great. So now we pretty much did step one of making our CLI. Like that's what Effect CLI gives you. It gives you the ability to fairly tersely and composably specify your command structure and deals with. It's basically a parser. Everything's a parser when you squint, and so it gives you a DSL for defining different ways to parse command line arguments, and then dumps them out to you in a type safe manner, and you take it from there with your internals. So this is where we did it in an hour. We did it. A video cut point there, and then Clapper for part 2. We can actually implement the internals. Any final words on the CLI stuff? Obviously, we might want subcommands in the future. We kind of previewed that, but
No, I mean, I think that this is a pretty good place to leave things for today. But I think that there's a lot within each module for like composing behavior onto a given option or argument. So, for example, like the args module also has options for like if you want to have a minimum or a maximum number of repetitions. I think there's like a another combinator. I forget what the name of it is. There's like at most, I think, and at least. I think so. You can say like at most the number of times you want something to appear, and I think it's type safe. So if you remove repeated, I think you'll get an issue here. And I can't remember if it turns it into an array by default or a repeated option.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so cool. you can compose behavior onto this.
Oh, it does turn it into a double array, unfortunately, if you have repeated and at most. So one or the other here. Yeah.
The repeated is like an unlimited number of repetitions. So you can specify a minimum or a maximum, or both. I think there's a between.
Okay. Yeah, we'll allow. You have to do a between. Perfect. Great.
And there's other things like within each of these modules as well. So, for example, like if you want to parse a set of flags or arguments into an object structure, for example, you can use the all combinator. So like, let's just say for the sake of argument that if you take, maybe we'll use options.all here as an example, but like if you want to have all of your options parsed into like a single options key in your command, right? We can use our prompt and copy options as an example. Like we can do const options or whatever. And just do options.all and open up brackets and then a object and then prompt comma copy. And if you look at the type of this will actually parse it into a structure. So like, again, there's a lot of like behavior you can compose onto this, depending on the particular requirements that you have.
Sure, we could turn this into a new type or parse it or map over it in some way. Can you effectfully map over it?
You can. There's a map effect method, I think. Okay. I have that on. Just type off of some option and then do options.map effect. Yeah. So there's effectful mapping. And so in here, you have the ability to access effect context as well. By default, we give you access to the file system path and terminal services. What else? There's other things you can do. Like, for example, if you want to say that your option adheres to a specific schema, like validate it with a schema, there's an options.with schema that allows you to say that your option needs to conform to this like particular schema. So Kit mentioned the fact that branding can be useful in certain circumstances. So if you want to like brand a type parsed off the command line, right? So like you can do that with options.with schema and then specify like a branded schema.
Yeah, can we maybe very quickly just to show that off? That could be interesting. Like there's the let me add schema to effect. And I forget how to do the maybe we can make one. We can wrap prompt. We can make prompt branded.
Yeah, in this case, we don't even need a separate type. We can actually brand it. We can do both. So let's start with the simple version. So at the end of your before you do options.optional here, let's do options.with schema and open up brackets, and we'll do schema.string.pipe schema.brand. And then open up for brackets and whatever name you want to give the brand, maybe prompty. And if you look at the type of prompt now, you'll see that it's a branded type. String head. You can make this better by importing the brand module from effect. And then we can declare our brand. So at the top here, we can do a type prompty equals brand string prompty. brand.branded, maybe. Sorry, brand.branded string and prompty. And then instead of, I think it takes the type parameter. Can you actually double check brand prompty and then give it a string? I know there's another method we can use as well.
Like this?
No, so this is not the one. If we go back to there's a from brand method, I know, that we can use. And instead of doing it like this, we can actually create the brand constructor. So after the type, underneath that, do a const prompty equals brand dot nominal, and then pass the type in. Yep, just like that. And then you can actually just do from brand prompty, like pass prompty in as a.
I imported the type. Silly. Okay. From brand prompty. Aha.
Yeah. Now, if you look at the type, then you get back, you'll see that you get an option of the actual branded type, and we can actually cast this type. So, like, if you want the opaque type, the prompty type in here, you can directly assign a type. So if you do prompt : options prompty, this would also work. Like after the prompt keyword.
I see. Yes. So can
you can like basically assign it an actual type. So if you toggle the type annotation here, that's one way to options and then pass in prompty, and this would also work.
It's an option of prompty.
And now, like, you'll get the opaque version in your hover type.
Cool.
Yeah, and there's also other cool stuff. So, for example, like if you're reading a particular file from the file system via an option, we have like a file schema helper where you can specify like the schema that your file should conform to, which can be useful if you're like reading config values from a file as part of your CLI or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to think of like the most common cases that people would be like using a CLI for. But we're always open to like hearing more stuff. And I know that there's a lot of things we need to go back and revisit. But there's a lot of functionality based into the parsing part of the CLI, which I think is pretty cool. This is kind of like the basics, but you can add a lot to the actual parsing of the argument, so that like when you actually get to having the type in your handler, you end up with like the most useful information possible.
Cool. Yeah. Well, great. I mean, yeah, that was pretty easy. Obviously, yeah. If we just made a beeline straight for the endpoint, we probably could have done it in 10 minutes. But we definitely added some more context, which I think is great. Use the word context again in a different context. I once saw an experimental dance show where the woman just kept saying the context of no context over and over again while like pouring milk everywhere. Or something. Yep. So that's I'll leave you with that.
That's some great context to end on.
I think so.
But anyways, thank you folks very much for joining us today. Really appreciate all of you coming to hang out. We'll try to do this more regularly, and we'll continue with our CLI tool the next time with the actual implementation. But yeah, maybe for now, I'll just go raid somebody real quick. And yeah, thank you all, folks, for joining us today.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for having me, Maxwell.
Just gonna quickly
get
somebody to raid. Second. Similar or smaller size, same category. Let's go find somebody. This person looks fun.
Destroy them, burn them down. Is it what? I'm not sure what a raid is exactly, but I can imagine.
When you take all your viewers from Twitch and you send them to somebody else's stream.
With violent intent.
With violent intent. No, in this case, we're to go chill.
All right.
Cheers, everybody. It was good to see you all. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.